Welcome to the Purpose for Life podcast. Great to have you back here. I'm Suzanne Roberts, your host. I'm author of It's Deeper Than That and the founder of The Great Reconnection. And I'm so excited to have here with us today Jason Barger, who is an amazing human being. And I know you'll learn a lot from listening to him today. So thank you for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Great to get some time with you.
Thank you. I think I met you when you were starting doing something about mimicking life with the carousel of a luggage carousel. Do you remember that? Can
I
you
do, yeah.
can you talk about that? And then we'll evolve from how you've grown into where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. The very first book that I wrote was a book called Step Back from the Baggage Claim, Change the World, Start at the Airport. And in order to write that book, I spent 7 days living in 7 different airports across the country without leaving the airports the entire time. So I went from Columbus to Boston to Miami to Chicago to Minneapolis to Seattle to San Diego, 7 cities in 7 days without leaving the airport the entire time, and watched the way that we are literally moving throughout the world. But also, metaphorically speaking, I began to write this book about using air travel as a metaphor of what does it mean to step back and to think about how we move throughout the world. And so this funny, amusing, interesting, fascinating experience led to a book that really, again, wasn't about airports, but was about this message of
Mm.
stepping back and the central image being the baggage claim. If you've ever been to one of those really crowded baggage claims where the buzzer thing goes off, the
Yes.
which I still have no idea why that's the best we've come up with, but we instinctively go rushing up, and I watch this in 7 different cities of humans going up to the baggage carousel and putting their shins up against the cold metal carousel and claiming their space and pushing people out of the way and
Right.
frantically looking for their bag and just this chaos. And I just kept thinking, what does it really mean to step back from the baggage claim and to create some space and to maybe think about what if we were to choose to move differently? And if we're doing that literally in the airports, there's probably other areas of our lives where maybe we're bringing that same spirit to it.
Yeah, to me it becomes a hyper-focused, pressurized state that's
Yeah,
only focused on yourself, getting what you want when you want it now, and you don't
that's
care
right.
what you do to get what you want. So, do you think that what you were inviting for people was to consider to, in stepping back, to pausing,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
to include
Yeah.
other people,
Yep.
not just yourself? What are some of the other things you would hope for from that for us humans?
Yeah, I mean, the messages throughout the book and certainly then as this book came out and being asked to speak and really get to engage with places of talking about really what is the point of this is yeah, to think about how we are moving and how am I moving on an everyday basis. And so what does it mean for me to get out of that incessant hurry for what I
Right,
think I need and I want, and I'm in more of a hurry than you are, and my bag's more important than yours, and
right.
my, and to step back and to pause for a second and say, what is the actual mission and purpose here? And then to think about what does it mean to look around and recognize, as you said, the other human beings that are also standing around the carousel. And then, by the way, there might be a better way that we could do this to help one another and or more efficiently gather these items. But then what does it mean to kind of step forward? And so, the book uses some of these images from the airport to
Mhm.
then connects it to stories from my life and then well outside and other even organizational examples of what does it mean to really then step back, but then think about how do we travel more gracefully throughout our days and throughout the world.
And how do we cultivate that kind of grace inside of ourselves?
Well, I think it's a practice. What I talk about in the book, and certainly my life. I hope I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and never pretend to be. But I think that my life is a practice, and so how do we practice slowing ourselves down? And even though we might have clarity of the goals or the things that are important to us, but to make sure that we're not racing past people or trampling people along the way to get there. It's cultivating this spirit of gratitude and appreciation. Lately, I've been challenging myself to kind of cultivate appreciation for things and people, and trying to just be in the moment and look around and recognize. It's also giving people grace, that even those that might be in a hurry or knocking you down in order to get their bag, that there's probably a story behind that. And oftentimes, as you sit and you learn from the people around us, the issue isn't the issue. And so it's manifesting itself that way at the baggage claim, but there's something else going on
Mm-hmm.
underneath the surface. And so I think cultivating and bringing attention back to that, a spirit of gratitude, a spirit of, hold on, appreciating the people and the other things that might be going on around us, trying to give people grace. Those are all, some ways in which, at least each day, I'm trying to cultivate that.
It's so interesting listening to you. I just 2 weeks ago did 2 free virtual "How do you move from disconnection to restoration?"
Mm,
And I had a list of symptoms of disconnection, and people could identify the symptoms of disconnection. And what was interesting is when I said, "Do you have a sense of longing or missing or something that is a signal that would turn your attention towards what you're cultivating, like grace and
mm,
observation and gratitude and those things?" And it was crickets.
mm.
And then when they couldn't identify whatever that thing is, it's making you, that made you want to go into airports and observe.
Yep.
They couldn't find that in them. And I had to say, well, it could be heaviness, or it could be restlessness, or it could be dissatisfaction, or it could be, an ache that you can't understand. Nothing in this world, no matter how much you produce or prove, perform, it doesn't take care of it. And they started, thinking about that. And then I asked, what do you think the percentage of your day that you're spending in disconnection? And these are people that I would say were high-level leaders, retired people, managers. It was a wide range. It was a diverse group of people in both classes. And they said 60 to 85% of the time they're living in disconnection. And I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
why? Like, why? But why do you think it's so hard to, well, I'm going to ask you two questions.
Yeah.
What in the world gave you the signal to go do that kind of research that you basically did? And
Yeah.
why do you think it's so hard for people to identify that signal?
Yeah, well, the first one is, I'm a strange guy. I guess that's the first quick answer is no, but the truth to that is, this idea had been marinating within me for many years. I was fortunate to be in a role previous, where I was leading a lot of people on servant leadership kind of trips around the world to build houses internationally for families living in poverty. And had started a project that was serving the homeless living outside of the shelter system in Columbus. And so I was engaged in all these kind of bringing people together to go do great work. And oftentimes in all my travels, I just kept seeing that metaphor as such a rich metaphor. Here we were on our way traveling to go do this great stuff, and yet in the airports of watching this kind of everybody going different directions, and yet lives colliding together, and yet this kind of frustration and was just palpable. And so I kept, for years saying, someday I'm going to write a book about that. And then I really can't tell you why, but all of a sudden within me, I just knew this was a journey that I needed to go on. And I needed to attempt to try to take this idea and this spirit that I was feeling within me, of how do I communicate that, and can I
Mm,
tell the story of what I'm feeling, and really had no expectation of it beyond that, of can I articulate it and tell it, and will anybody care, will it resonate with anybody? And fortunately, then it began to connect with people, and they began to ask those questions, and certainly they began to personalize it for themselves, but they also then immediately started to step back and think about their places of employment, and the communities and the groups that they are a part of. And so your second question, one thing I would say, and I would just layer on top of of your great observation is that right now, what I see within teams and organizations is that we know that we are a few things are happening. One, back to the attention, is we know attention is a currency.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it was Mary Oliver who said the soul exists and it's built entirely out of attentiveness.
Mm.
This kind of attent. So what are we giving our eyes to and our focus to and our attention to? And we know we've never lived in a more distracted world than we are
Right.
right now. And so there's that. And then we also layer on top of that right now across organizations, we're living in, employee engagement just hit a 10-year low.
Yeah.
We're living in a very low trusting environment.
Yeah.
Recent Gallup study said that only 23% of employees trust their leaders and trust the direction of their organization. Only 20% of employees say they feel connected to their organizational culture. And yet 90% of them say that's exactly what I want. And so we're in this very disconnected and very distracted and oftentimes divided world.
Yeah.
And yet, what people are wanting is to actually feel connected and feel like there's a level of trust and feel like they are valuable and they belong to whatever we are co-creating together.
I I just was on a podcast. Was it yesterday or no, it was the day before, and she asked me a question, and I said we're in a trust recession.
Yeah.
And and
Yeah.
I everything that you're saying, I'm seeing, and you're saying a lot of interesting things. I do think attention is a soul quality. It's not our mind. Our mind
Mm,
directs attention, and we get to determine how we're using our attention for what. And I think that there's so much pressure to perform and produce at the cost of the self, and that the bottom line is more important than people. And
mm.
the more there's a lack of trust, the more pressure gets built in. And then you're really at the baggage claim, pushing things aside because there's pressure. I feel like that attention gets very narrow instead of broad and open. And in that narrowness, it produces like a survival kind of attribute in our nervous system. And we lose our interconnectedness and our being part of a whole. We are part of a living interweb of life here. We're just
That's right.
humans in the midst of a lot of life, and
Yep.
we're connected to each other. What would you say? Because I believe as above, so below. So, what do you want to say to leaders that are in a position of influence? What's required of them, and why should it matter to them? And should's a strong word, but why would it be beneficial for it to matter to them?
Yeah, well, in all the work that I do with leaders and teams and organizations, we're often having that very conversation because it's not just about somebody from the outside coming in and then, and certainly I don't view myself as this role, but to tell you what to do, but it is to invite us into these conversations that are the currency for change, and to say, well, if we know this, if we know we're in a very low trusting environment, our people are disengaged, we're distracted, and we're not sure what is the most important thing that we're giving our minds and our hearts to, then it's our job as the leaders is to cultivate a culture where we think differently than that. And our opportunity is to be countercultural in that sense.
Mhm.
And so but it starts with the leaders. And so oftentimes we have a conversation. I said, before we get to me talking about why I think it's important for me and I want to listen to why might you think, just as a human being, why might you think this stuff is important? If you need some research to back it up, I can give you that, and so
Right.
I build a case for them to also show that if what you are interested in is higher level of performance at work, or that your goals, whatever they are for the organization, that you're not meeting them, or you want to meet them quicker, or whatever the thing is, I said, well, hold on, let's also recognize that greater levels of engagement actually lead to greater levels of performance.
That's right.
Let's also remember that greater levels of joy and connection
Mhm.
lead to greater levels of satisfaction. At a time when these low trusting environments and many organizations have had such high turnover and retention has been a challenge, you look at it and say, well, if you can be countercultural and build a culture that people actually want to be a part of, your hiring goes up and your retention goes up, in many cases, I point out some real economic
Right.
advantages to thinking this way. And then we reverse our engineer and say, like, all of that stuff is true. And now let's get to the human side of why this is important to people. And so, back to your question of what can leaders be doing is, if we're in a very low trusting environment, I mean, let's just start with that word, is that there's an opportunity that all of us to build a level of trust, and it starts with us. And so there's different drivers of trust. And so how are we articulating with, these kind of three drivers of trust that come out of research is logic, empathy, and authenticity. And so are we communicating clearly and with logic that people can wrap their head around why we might approach something the way we are,
Hmm.
why we're going to go the direction we are? And if we're not, when people feel like things are cloudy, trust goes down. And so are we speaking in logic in a way and connecting with people in that way? Are we showing empathy? So again, back to the baggage claim, it's not just what I want, but it's about asking, well, what is it you want? And what are your ideas? And helping to engage with our people in not just I, as the leader, am telling you what to do, but to really practice that servant leadership that thinks about it's not about me, it's about that mission and that's greater
Hmm.
than us. And my role is actually to help coach and develop and be in relationship and empower people that have gifts that I don't have to go do great stuff. But it's a two-way street and not a one-way street. And then lastly, with authenticity, are we sharing the information that we have? If we're not being transparent and people think you're hiding something or the motive is different, trust goes down. And when people feel like you're being real, this is the information I have. This is how I'm hoping to approach it. What about you? When they feel like you're being authentic, the level of trust goes up. So one of the first things we can start doing is within our as leaders, but then also within our cultures, is starting to build back some of that trust that might be lost.
I think that's brilliant. I love that. I
Mm.
I was at a conference and it said a boss says I and a leader says we.
Yep,
And I have a friend that's a vice president at an organization, and she asked all of her team, and she does it herself. She says we in all the emails instead of I. Just that one simple thing of
that's right.
changing from I to we changed everybody's attention. And
That's
that
right.
sounds like a small thing, but it's very galvanizing every time to switch I to we.
No, and I taught in all the culture shaping work that I do with teams and organizations is we talk about that language drives behavior.
Hmm.
And so the words we use matter. And so if I'm saying that I am a leader that thinks of themselves at the bottom of the pyramid, not at the top of the pyramid, then the language I use and my actions ought to reflect that. And if yet I say that, but every time I go to speak or engage with somebody, it's all about I, it doesn't give that same, it starts to create this kind of cultural dissonance between the people because it's about the I, not the we. And
Right.
so we talk a lot about is it a culture of we or is it a culture of me? And
Absolutely.
bringing our mind and our words and our actions in congruence with that.
And what do you do inside of you to stay connected to the sense of being part of an inner web?
Appreciate the question. A lot of things. I try to be very intentional. I have a daily practice myself, a little prayer, a little meditation, a little thing that I do each day. And back to this, trying to cultivate kind of gratitude and appreciation in my own life, where I start each day and I have kind of a litany of people in my life that I acknowledge that I am grateful for, people that have influenced me and impacted me that have helped me be where I am. And then also cultivating, bringing my, again, attention back to who is it that I'm trying to be and
Hmm.
what is it that I want to put out in the world. And so there's some daily practice kind of things like that I bring my attention to that each day. And then throughout the year, I have a lot going on. So I have a lot of organizations and places that I am trying to contribute to and do. And yet I got to make sure that I'm taking care of myself and that I'm breathing in some good oxygen so that I can help, serve others. And so I have to be really intentional about throughout the year of planning in some little retreats for myself, some times to kind of make sure that my mind and heart are in the right place. I'm pretty intentional about the calendar of how I approach not only a day, but also a week, a month, a quarter, a year. And the practice of that helps me, again, bring my attention back to where I'm hoping it is. And again, I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but that's some of my practices.
First of all, I hope everybody's listening to the value of practice. This doesn't happen without practice. And whatever way that any of us want to practice setting, whether it's starting with gratitude or cultivating stillness or the ability to turn the attention inward away, like the stepping back and turning the attention inward. I say that our soul is a currency. It's a life force energy, and it's inside of us. And when we can get still enough, we can have access to a self-renewing energy. And then you're talking about alignment. And so in some ways, you're looking, am I cultivating an alignment with, you could say your head, heart, your gut. You could say with logic, empathy, and authenticity. But am I being who I want to be as a human being? And what do I
That's
need
right.
to do to practice it? And it isn't about being perfect. It's about, can we keep evolving and refining? But we have to have a clear intention with our attention, right? And then practice. I have all my coaching clients sit for a minimum of 5 minutes a day, and it's really hard for them
Yeah.
to just stop and sit and breathe for 5 minutes. And, whether it's listening to a guided meditation, they all struggle with it. But I'm like, you can't really make sustainable change if you don't create space for something new.
That's right. Yeah,
You'll.
what we know about us as humans is we repeat patterns. We also know it's more, quote unquote, normal for us to then repeat the same pattern we did yesterday and to fall into, levels of complacency.
Mhm.
And so if we want something different than that, if we want to cultivate something new or different, then that means we've got to cultivate something different. And we've got to
Yes.
change the way that we might approach something. And so, one of the other books that I wrote is called Thermostat Cultures. And as you're talking about alignment, that really is what it is about, is, do I even know the temperature that I aim to set? Am I a
Interesting.
thermometer all day long that just reacts to everything around me and the temperature just goes up and down depending on how I'm feeling today and all the external things that happen around me?
Mhm.
And do I just go through a day and the temperature just goes up and down depending on how I'm feeling and whatever's happening around me? Or is there some intention around what is that temperature that I'm trying to set in my life? And then as we talk about it with teams and with cultures, organizational cultures as a whole, what is that temperature of how we do what we do that we're trying to do? And it's that alignment, that congruence to understanding what the temperature might be that we're aiming for. But then what are we going to intentionally practice and go
Right.
do to build habits in alignment with that? And so taking the temperature is one thing, but setting the temperature is that daily dynamic practice.
I love that you also build into your own structure self-care and sustainability. And I think sometimes that doesn't happen. And the leaders feel like if they put pressure on people, that will give better rewards. And it doesn't,
Yeah.
like so. If the leaders are on board and are committed and are interested in servant leadership and are interested in the temperature and are interested in stepping back, how long does it take, do you think, to make a cultural shift?
Well, I'd say it happens in stages. Like, because when I talk about culture, culture is dynamic. And so what that means is it's not static. So it's changing moment by moment every single day. And I often personalize and say, my wife and I, the culture of our marriage is not finished, right?
Right.
It's dynamic. It's changing moment by moment today. And it will continue. And the two of us together, because we are in the relationship with one another, are going to shape what it becomes. And so culture is dynamic, which means it's always changing. And it's shaped by the way we think, act, and interact. And it starts with kind of how do we think about, so for my wife and I, like, how do we even think about the marriage that we're hoping to have? And then do our individual actions back that up? And in every little interaction that we have, is it cultivating that temperature that we say that we want. And again, we're not perfect, but we can calibrate the thermostat together. And so in organizations, as the more and more that happens with individual relationships, but also with entire teams and organizations. And so how do we begin to see the culture shifting? Well, it's shifting every day. And so it might be in small ways, but even as we begin to introduce a new idea or something resonates, and all the way that you were describing the way that we are part of this interconnected world, things are being shaped and changing moment by moment every single day. So it happens on that very small scale. But if where you were going with the question is the teams and organizations that see the greatest levels of shifts and changes in them are the ones that are committed to this, that it's not a drive-through experience.
Right,
This
right.
is a longer term commitment. And this is years
Thank you.
of practicing and developing. And I talk about this kind of the 6 A's of change and the process of change that we go through, that whether we know it or not, we're always in the midst of helping to cultivate that future that we're trying to create. And so in some organizations, the ones that get celebrated for having these amazing cultures, and whoever that is in your mind, which none of them, by the way, are perfect. I've been fortunate to be in and out of many of the world-class organizations around the world that get celebrated for that. And none of them are perfect, but they are more intentional and
Mm-hmm.
they are more committed. And what you find is years down the road, people in their organization say, oh, yeah, well, here, that's just the way we do it. And the reality is, well, it has become the way
Way
they
you
do
do
it,
it.
but it's because of the thousands, if not millions, of tiny little thinking, acting, and interacting that led to that point.
We are going to have to begin to wind down. I just want to say what I really appreciate what you just said is what's micro and what's macro, and
Yeah,
also the timing of nature. We don't plant a broccoli seed and eat broccoli tomorrow. We can watch
that's right.
like the if we could look underground, the little seed crack and the thing pushing up through, like in nature, it has a slow evolutionary process. And I love that there's micro changes within a bigger macro system that takes time to evolve. And we don't really think like that anymore. We're just so interested in instant results. But nature does take time to move the way it moves. And just keeping the course is true for all of us, whether we're doing our internal work inside of us, waking up every day, setting your intention, or we're doing it in a team or a larger organization, or how the organization relates to the community. All of that requires focused attention and practice over time. And it's not a rush to win to get somewhere.
No, I think that's beautifully said, and I appreciate you saying that. The words that come to my mind are from Plato that said, "What is honored will be cultivated," and the more we honor something,
Yeah.
but the cultivation takes time.
Yeah.
And so it may begin to cultivate something in us, but oftentimes the things take time. And so
Absolutely.
do we continue to honor it?
Thank you so much. I love to ask my guests, what do you think the purpose for life is?
Oh, wow. To love, to feel alive, to
Mm.
be alive with each other,
Hmm.
to care. And I do think more and more lately, I've been thinking about this concept of joy, because I think you can miss that,
Yes.
and we can become so focused on things that are not perfect. And yet, I think we're meant to experience and feel and find joy. Not every day. It's not meant to be
No,
puppy
but it's
dogs and
part
ice
of our
cream,
aliveness. So,
but it's a part of our aliveness.
yeah,
So
for sure.
those would be some of my first thoughts.
I love that. Uh, Jason, I know you mentioned a couple books. How can people get a hold of you and how can they get a hold of your books?
You can Google my name, Jason V. Barger. You can go to jasonvbarger.com. Social media, Jason V. Barger. I have a podcast as well called The Thermostat with Jason Barger that you can find wherever you get podcasts. Those are some of the ways if it's authentic for you.
Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. It's been an alive conversation that has brought me joy. So thank you.
I appreciate it. And thanks for everything you're doing. Thanks
Yeah,
for inviting me on.
absolutely. Thank you, listeners, for being here with us today. Subscribe, keep following us, share it with your friends. I'm your host, Suzanne Roberts. This is Purpose for Life podcast. Once again, I'm the author of It's Deeper Than That and the founder of The Great Reconnection. And we look forward to having you back with us. Thank you.